Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another Q&A session. This time we're celebrating an astounding 5,000 subscribers. Thank you so much to each and every one of you who have subscribed to my channel, checked out my videos, and left amazing, kind comments on them. But you're all here for the answers to your wonderful questions. So without further ado, let's get to that, shall we? And our first question comes from James Dubuisson. Apologies if I mispronounce your last name. What is your favourite April Fool's joke? I'm not a big fan of pranks being pulled on people, especially physical pranks that are intrusive to other people's personal space. But there is one April Fool's joke that I saw a video of that I just could not stop laughing at. When I just start describing it, I have a feeling a lot of you guys will recognize it because it was going around on Facebook for a bit. It's a video of a student recording their teacher's reaction because this teacher has a policy that if a person's phone rings in class, they have to answer it, put it on speakerphone for the whole class and for him to hear. So there's a phone call in the middle of the classroom, so he asks the girl to answer it. And it's from Planned Parenthood saying that the tests were positive, that she's going to be a mother, and that they understand that the father's not in the picture anymore. And you can tell definitely the teacher feels quite terrible about calling this girl out. So the girl answers the phone and she tries to wrap up the conversation quickly, feeling quite embarrassed. And then the conversation stops. She puts her phone away and the teacher apologizes to her for putting her through that. And the student says, "Oh, it's okay. It's really okay. I'm actually planning on keeping the baby, and I already know what we're going to call it. The first name's going to be April, last name Fools." And the entire class just loses their shit, as well as the teacher. And that's a genuinely hilarious April Fool's joke to me, because it's just that light level of uncomfortableness, but then it's just immediately played off for laughs, and everyone was in on it except for the teacher, obviously. But it's one of the strongest laughs I've had in a while, so I have to say that's probably my favorite April Fool's joke that I've ever seen so far. Well, thank you so much for your question, James. And the second question comes from the Warhammer podcast. What are your thoughts and opinions about my country, Canada? I have a strong love of Canada. I've only been there once, admittedly. I went to Toronto for an anime convention. I went to Anime North last year, and that was a lot of fun. I really want to go back to Canada sometime and just explore all the different states. Actually go on a proper trip around all the different areas around Canada, especially up in the countryside where it's the beautiful dense forests and the mountains as well. I also really want to go back to Canada because I actually have some cousins who live, one in Toronto and one maybe an hour's drive just outside of Toronto, and I absolutely loved hanging out around the city area. She lived quite close to downtown, so after the convention wrapped up, when I was tired, when my feet got too sore, I would head back into town and just wander around, just relaxing, hanging out. And even though I was pretty much completely on my own for the rest of the trip, because she was busy with work and other things, so even around the anime convention, I was completely on my own wandering around. I just had the most amazing time just people watching, because you just have such interesting people to observe around the markets, because I was there from Friday until Sunday and then had to leave on Monday. So when it was Sunday, there was these markets all set up in this kind of community area that was a mix between shops and houses, but it was all very kind of a little bit rustic and a little bit new age as well. So lots of places selling crystals and organic foods and things like that. But everyone was just so happy and so welcoming and wonderful that I was kind of a little bit sad that my trip over there was wrapping up, but just seeing people playing music on the streets and just groups of dancers getting involved, and they didn't even know each other. They would just get up and start dancing. It was just an amazing experience to see this kind of community. And so there's a lot of things that I really love about Canada, but there's a lot to discover about it as well. And I would love to come up sometime and actually have a proper visit and explore a number of different cities around Canada. But yes, I really do love Canada because I have family over there, and I really want to catch up with them more and more and hang out with them more and more. So here's hoping in the future I get to go there many times. Cool. Thank you so much for your question. Next question comes from David Bliss. Mr. Cuddles, Luna, Nostromo, David, or Peppermint Chew as best pet? I know you have a second question, but I'll answer that one quickly. Dreadlord Peppermint Chew. For obvious reasons, he is the spearmint terror that shall be unleashed upon the cosmos. So, as much as I love the other pets from my playthroughs of Starbound, Peppermint Chew, I think, is my favorite because I've been playing that character the longest, and we've kind of added all this lore about Peppermint Chew in particular. But now for apparently the real question. I know that you have said that a lot of people inspired you to get into narration during your streams, but what pieces really caught your attention and made you want to give it a try? It's not so much individual pieces that were narrated, except for maybe one or two. It was mostly the people. It was especially the people in the narration community. Individuals like Old Man Murphy, Well Hey Productions, Barnabas Demos, of course Mr. Creepypasta, and just these amazingly talented individuals. Oh, Right Hand of Doom, my apologies, Right Hand of Doom. I love his voice so much as well. It was just these amazing people that were so talented, and they had the most amazing voices, and I wanted to eventually become friends with them. I wanted to get to know them, but I didn't really have a way of approaching them of sorts, and I didn't really put any merit into my own voice that I thought I could really succeed in voice acting or narration. I thought my voice was okay enough that I could maybe make a couple of videos, I guess. But I distinctly remember one thing that took place that really cemented me, okay, I'm actually gonna try this. I really want to get to know these people. A couple of years ago, if you're in the creepypasta community, you might remember there was a charity live stream done. I think it was a 24-hour one, and it was organized by Mr. Creepypasta and a number of his friends, and it was a charity stream that had to do with the horrible Slender Man stabbings that took place in Wisconsin. And it was a charity drive to get as much money as they could together to give to the victim of the attack. And it really hit me just how amazingly compassionate the community was. The fact that they really didn't want what they did to be stigmatized as evil or bad, especially since the attackers said that they were going to be doing this in the name of Slender Man, which would have it spiraled into quite the nightmare in terms of media wanting to then label all creepypasta as evil, and that the people who made narrations would be evil in turn. And I was just so touched and so amazed at the community pulling itself together in such a passionate way to help this girl and to pick her up and show that the people who love horror and want to make careers out of this and want to fuel their passions, they're not horrible people. And it was just so moving to me. And they recorded the live stream, all 24 hours of it, and I think they uploaded it to Mr. Creepypasta's channel. Might need correction there. But I think I listened to that live stream, the full 24 hours, maybe 5 or 6 times, start to finish. And it would be things like I'd be playing video games and I would just have that running in the background and I would listen to it. But it was stories completely back to back. And I remember there was one or two that was read by The Right Hand of Doom. And I can't remember the name of the story, but I remember he did this amazing voice that was very, it was absolutely insane. It was very Joker-esque, like in insane asylum, inmate patient kind of thing. And his performance was just so freaking good. And I was, I was just so taken aback by all these amazing people that were so talented. And I thought, like, no, they're not going to be interested in hanging out with someone like me. Like, I'm a dork who has a weird voice. Like, no one's going to be interested in talking to me. But then, like 3.5 years later, guess where we are? So yeah, I think that's kind of the best way I can answer your question. It was mostly the individuals and the wonderful community that I wanted to be a part of. Whether that community is still as it was back then is up for debate, but the people that I've met on my journey towards becoming or during the process of becoming a narrator, I'm just so thankful for their friendship, for their support, for their helpful critique, because they really want you to be the best that you can be. And they mean that sincerely. They offer you criticism and feedback because they want you to improve. While there's always people who might get jealous that you might have more subscribers than they are, all the people that I've talked to have been nothing but supportive and helpful, especially my amazing friend Mr. Extremes, who has been a huge help to me in terms of encouraging me to try out new things, like the ASMR series that I'm now well known for in a strange way. But yeah, it's the people that I'm just so thankful for, and they were the ones who caught my attention and made me want to give a shot at narration in the first place. Thank you so much for your question, David. And the next question comes from ShagoHod666. Apologies if I butchered your name. What hobbies and activities do you enjoy when you aren't recording or working your day job? Kind of between narration, streaming, and kind of doing things between that's kind of like general daily care stuff. My biggest hobby, I would have to say, is Dungeons and Dragons. I just love that game. I love it so much. It's just the best. Like, I met the friends I have now through Dungeons and Dragons. It was a couple of years ago. I wanted to start playing again, but the thing is, I didn't know any immediate friends who ran games or who would really be interested, and I wasn't fully confident in running a game myself. So I looked up online for some meetup groups that were centered around Dungeons and Dragons, and I went to check one out, and then the person who was running it, he directed me over to a table like, oh, they've got 1 or 2 spots open on this group, and they're just starting out, so it's a perfect fit. It turned out to be quite the perfect fit. Now I hang out with this bunch of dorks a couple of times a week, and I just pour my heart into my characters. I love getting so immersed in the worlds that the Dungeon Master creates and writing amazing, long, edgy backstories for all of my characters. And yeah, I have to say that's probably my biggest hobby that I really enjoy doing. Other hobbies I have, I am a pretty good cook. I like to cook, and I especially love baking. I'm very well known for making amazing brownies and cookies, as well as like cakes and other delicious things. Like, I would consider cooking and baking a hobby as well. I really want to try and get more into other art forms as well. I really want to get back into practicing painting, especially watercolors. What else? I really want to get more into gardening as well and learn more about that, because that's such a big thing over here in England. But those are kind of things that eventually, if I get some more free time, I'll invest energy into working on those. Other hobbies, I really love singing as well. I a lot of the times sing a couple of songs before I record to kind of warm my voice up a bit. So yeah, between Dungeons and Dragons, cooking, singing, watercolor painting, and gardening, those are probably like a cluster of my key favorite hobbies. But I am very, very much obsessed with Dungeons and Dragons. I have a serious dice problem, and I'm not ready to get help in that regard yet. But thank you so much for your question. Next question comes from Lancelot. Did you ever expect your channel to kick off like it did when you wrote, recorded, and uploaded your ASMR vampire series? Oh. In some ways, I hoped that it would maybe, garner some extra attention towards my channel, that maybe people would be interested in it, like they might want to hear my voice, try something new. I never expected it to pick up as well as it did. Honestly, I've just been so taken aback by how many people have discovered my channel through my ASMR series. And it's especially touching to me because it's a series that I write myself, and I put so much energy into it. As you could probably tell from the writing to the sound editing, I put a lot of work into this series, and the fact that it's paid off as well as it has, I'm just so thankful for all of the people who take the time out to listen to it, to leave me comments and give me feedback on it, because it was very new territory for me. I was a fan of a couple of ASMR channels, especially people like Cardlin Audio. I love his work so much. So he was a huge inspiration to me. But I knew that my voice would be quite well suited for it, but I wasn't comfortable with doing anything too overly explicit, and I wasn't comfortable doing like the very close to microphone, like smacking noises. That doesn't really do anything for me, and yeah, I couldn't see myself feeling comfortable making those kind of videos. But I wanted to kind of meet the middle between something that was new and different for my channel, which is like ASMR, but also keeping the running themes of my channel, which is stories about fantasy and horror. So that's why I'm just so thankful for all the people who share my stuff, who like it, who subscribe to it because of what they hear and that they enjoy it. But I'm really excited to see where it takes me, and I'm already planning the next series after I finish The Castle of Blue Roses, and I'm really excited to see how you guys like it. It's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to try something a bit out there, but if you like my voice and you like my writing, then I have a feeling you're really going to like what I've got in mind. Oh, but thank you so much, Lancelot. I can't wait to see you on the next stream and on the Discord. And the next question comes from Jan Kowalski. Question is, what music do you listen to? Have you a favorite singer or band? I listen to a lot of different kinds of music. There's definitely some genres that do more for me than others. I'm a huge fan of rock, pop, a bit of metal, a lot of alternative and kind of more softer indie tracks. A lot of music that my 14-year-old self would absolutely love as well. Lots of kind of lots of angsty, like sad music as well. But I do really love instrumental pieces. I love performers like Lindsay Sterling. Although I have to say, my absolute favorite band is a Finnish band called Poets of the Fall. I love his voice so much. Oh my god, Marco Sorreto's voice is just unbelievably good. And I want to one day maybe do some covers of a couple of their songs for my channel. But I adore Poets of the Fall so much. I have all of their albums. I have a couple of t-shirts of theirs. I would love to one day see them in concert. They did some songs for, I believe it's the Alan Wake series, under the pseudonym Old Gods of Asgard. So you might be familiar with their music, but maybe not with the name of the band. I have to say, probably my favorite songs of theirs is my favorite songs of theirs, blah, is Carnival of Rust, Late Goodbye, Lift, Days, especially is one of my favorite songs of theirs. What else? Dawn as well is one of my other favorite songs of theirs. What else? Locking Up the Sun, Diamonds for Tears as well as another favorite of mine. Kamikaze Love as well as another great song of theirs. God, there's just so many songs of theirs that I absolutely adore. I also love kind of individual artists like Emily Autumn, Aurelio Voltaire. Oh, love his voice so much. There's a lot of different singers that I like, but I have to say probably definitely Poets of the Fall, Aurelio Voltaire, Emily Autumn, Lindsay Sterling, as well as some other kind of because I usually just like pick individual songs by albums, by particular artists from various albums. I also love bands like Depeche Mode as well. Love their music. There's a German singer by the name of Chris Pohl, but you might be more familiar with his work Blutengel. Essentially, it's him and another female singer, and it's predominantly his voice that's the lead vocals, but it's German metal, lot of goth music. Very, very, very much goth. I love his music so much. So good. It fuels my angsty little goth heart. I'm also a fan of country music as well, like country music that's more along the lines of fear God, all ye sinners, the devil is coming, like the only solace I have is whiskey and the red earth that understands me, that kind of country music. Not so much about bros and trucks and girls, definitely more along the lines of everyone is born in sin and you will all go to hell and there's nothing you can do about it except maybe the old man down the street who's seen way too much knows a thing or two about how you can be saved. That kind of music. Sometimes I love music that's a bit more abstract and out there. I love soundtracks to games and anime and movies and TV shows that I can kind of unwind and listen to, like the Transistor soundtrack. Also, musical groups like American Murder Song, which is an amazing group comprised of Terence Dunich and Sarah Hendelman. They're essentially the minds behind the creation of Reaper the Genetic Opera and The Devil's Carnival, two other amazing soundtracks which I absolutely adore listening to. So yeah, that kind of weird handful of eclectic performers, bands and singers would definitely be my top favorites, as well as other bands like Evanescence as well. Been a fan of this since I was a little kid. Other performers like Florence and the Machine. God, how can I forget Florence? I love her voice as well. I sing a lot of her songs for practice to warm my voice up, because they just such good songs for warming your voice up too, because you have to hold those long notes. So yeah, definitely Florence as well. And I think that's kind of most of them. Marina and the Diamonds as well. I love her voice as well. She's so amazing. Oh, and of course, the quintessential Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Oh my god, just all of the love for the lyrics and his voice and just the atmosphere of his music, just so good. Especially Red Right Hand and Where the Wild Roses Grow, two of my absolute favourite songs. So I hope that answers your question, Jan. Sorry, it was a kind of bit rambling. It was just me trying to think off the top of my head of singers and bands that I especially love. So yeah, thank you so much for your question. Sorry it's a little bit long-winded, but I hope it answers it. Next question comes from Nobody. Another strange and interesting question. Do you think the Easter Bunny is real? I believe there is a spirit, possibly, of Easter. Because I don't so much celebrate Easter as much as I celebrate Ostara, which is the start of spring, essentially. And I think there is a lot of forces behind kind of the way that nature works, whether it's just like a literal force of nature or if it's like a manifestation into some kind of tangible, maybe somewhat sentient force in the form of like a spirit that brings the spring. I don't quite believe that there is a literal giant bunny roaming the lands, putting Easter eggs in flower pots. But I would like to think that there's still like raw, untapped animal kind of spirits out there in the world, and a lot of those have ties to spring, so who's to say that the Easter Bunny isn't real? It's kind of a strange answer, but it's kind of an odd question, so I hope that answers it, nobody. Thank you so much for your question, though. Next question comes from Chris Van Vleer. As a writer, are there any stories you've written that had a specific inspiration, and what was it? There's a couple of stories that I've written that I can pinpoint, like, yes, that is what inspired me. There's one story that's on my channel called, I think it's Rose in the Bayou. That was a story that I had to write for my master's, for one of my classes for my master's. And that was just kind of inspired by my general love of like Southern Gothic atmosphere and stuff like that. Yeah, so that was more inspired by more of a aesthetic than anything pinpointing in particular. There is a series that I'm working on at the moment. It's not going to be uploaded to my channel. It's not an ASMR thing or anything. But there is a book series that I've been planning for a while that's directly inspired by my characters' adventures in Dungeons and Dragons. And so I can pinpoint that as a specific point of inspiration. But then I'm just trying to find ways of rewording things so that it fits in my own world and it isn't just like straight ripping off the player's handbook and all the names of the spells and things like that. I have to say those are probably like the two biggest things that I can kind of pinpoint inspiration. The current series that I'm writing, The Castle of Blue Roses, the vampire ASMR, I think I said that in the last Q&A what my influences for that was, which was heavily inspired by a D&D campaign called Curse of Strahd, where it takes place in Barovia, which is a Transylvania-esque like setting. Yeah, and just kind of The Castle of Blue Roses has been inspired by my love of gothic fiction, a lot of video games as well. There's also a little bit of Haunting Ground, if you're familiar with that video game. There's a bit of that in the Vampire series as well as other things like some Crimson Peak is thrown in there as well. And yeah, some stuff like that. But I try to like draw from a number of different inspirations, but then try and mix it up myself into my own strange little brew. But I hope that answers your question, Chris. Thank you so much for your questions. And the next question comes from Pariah. Hey Steph, congrats on 5k, thank you so much. It's great skimming through the comments of the latest videos and seeing the increasing rate of positive feedback alongside the original cult following, if you will. Anyways, my question is a rather short one and has probably been answered before, but due to self-satisfaction and curiosity, I'll ask it anyway. Go ahead. As it is known, you've read out a few H.P. Lovecraft scripts, and as a fan of H.P. myself, I'm curious, who are your top 3 characters in the Lovecraft universe, so to say? Ooh, that is a weighted question. It's kind of tricky when it comes to Lovecraft, because there's iconic entities and like a handful of really iconic characters. But most of the stories that I've read, it's been kind of just protagonist. It's been like the view character. Protagonist is beholding these terrible things happen. But I do have a couple of characters that I am quite fond of. Of course, you can't go wrong with ye old, great and powerful Cthulhu, because at this point he's just so fucking iconic. Like, who doesn't love Cthulhu? Everyone should love Cthulhu. Other characters that I really love, I actually quite like Nyarlathotep. Apologies if I mispronounced his name again. Nyarlathotep, maybe because he, as an unstoppable force, it seems to have a bit more of a sense of not humanity but humanism in the way of his design and his motives. And he definitely describes, like, in more of an abstract way, Lovecraft's fear of the other, which was something quite prevalent in his work, especially in this particular character. But Nyarlathotep is like, he's just fucking cool, okay? An eternal, ageless pharaoh seeking to, like, essentially take over the world. How's that not cool? There's a number of other gods which are pretty badass. Azathoth is awesome. Hastur is awesome. I quite like Dagon as well. Maybe because I'm a huge fan of the story, The Shadow over Innsmouth, and so I like kind of aquatic-based elder gods like Cthulhu and Dagon. But if we're talking characters that are much more like human-based, like actual characters and not like elder gods, Lavinia Watterly. I won't go into details as to who she is in particular if you haven't read The Dunwich Horror. But, oh dear Lord, Lavinia, I'm so deeply sorry for all the things that happened to you. Because she, like the character that she's named after in Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus, she's a character who just suffers. She has such awful things done to her, and so in a lot of ways, she's kind of a favorite character because I just feel so genuinely sorry for her. She's one of the more human characters. So you can have like cool favorites because like character designs are just like awesome and badass, hence why Cthulhu and Hastur and Azathoth are so cool. But if we're talking human characters, Lavinia is probably my favorite. Thank you so much for your question, Pariah. I really appreciate it. Thanks. Next question comes from Nerpa Derpa. Oh, sorry. Great username. What inspires me to write such enthralling stories and narrations? A lot of things inspire me. Movies, TV shows, games that I'm playing, just art that I see in general. I kind of described what my main influences were for my vampire series, but a lot of things I draw inspiration from different movies and other things that I find fascinating. A lot of the time I'll just be like scrolling on Pinterest and I come across like all these cool images of monsters and landscapes and stuff, so I might draw inspiration from those as well. Because my Pinterest is more filled with pictures of monsters than they are with, like, cooking recipes. And because I do use Pinterest for a lot of things, like getting inspiration from, and for world building and things like that. And yeah, so that's kind of what inspires me to write. But just knowing that there's, like, an amazing audience on my channel wanting to get the next chapter, that also inspires me to keep writing and keep making chapters, and also to just push myself to continue to try new things, which is why I'm hoping, why I went with the first series being like vampire, like straight up vampire, because I knew that there'd be quite a few people interested in vampire ASMR. But the next one, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do something that I haven't seen done for ASMR before, but it's probably out there already, but I'm going to take my own take on it. And it's a series that was kind of out of the blue inspired. I think it was a couple of months ago that the thought kind of popped into my head that I thought, hey, this could be a cool idea, because I could already see like the story slowly coming together in my mind. So even though I might be inspired for like a short one shot, yeah, I want to write slightly longer stories. And so I get inspired by stories that I've already read, like visual imagery that I really like, and also just like scrolling around on Pinterest, as well as I've been fortunate enough to go traveling a fair bit. So I have been heavily inspired by amazing cities that I've seen as well, like especially Prague. Oh my god, Prague is amazing. I would love to go back there someday. Prague, San Francisco, Toronto, back home, being in Perth and like the bushland around Perth as well. Yeah, inspired by lots of different things. But I hope that answers your question, Nopa Dopa. Thank you so much. And the next question comes from John Casey. Hey Stephanie, what's your favourite monster/creature? Ooh, that's like asking for me to pick between children. As much as I do have a strong place in my heart for like classic monsters like vampires and werewolves and things like that, I really have a soft spot for Wendigos. I really love Wendigos. Not so much Wendigos like the way that they're depicted in Until Dawn. Wendigos kind of in the design of like the massive skeletal like deer skulls with like all the bones showing and the bits of torn flesh and things like that. I find those really fascinating and just so freaking cool to look at because I love those. I love skeletal based monsters, and Wendigos, when they're kind of depicted in that way, where they're much more skeleton based and they have the ties to different nature spirits. A lot of the time they're depicted with like stag skulls, but I also love ones with like the skulls of wolves or big cats like cougars and things like that. So I have to say, as much as I do love kind of classic monsters, also including like evil mermaids, like spiky mermaids, I love those. Wendigos I do have a very soft place in my heart for. I just think they're so cool. And I'm much more inclined towards more fantasy based monsters than I am to sci-fi based ones. Like Wendigos do much more for me than I think like aliens do. But that's just my personal taste. Thank you so much for your question, John. Next question comes from Andrew Fisher. If you could choose to live in any fictional universe, which one would it be and why? Also, what has been your favourite story or stories to narrate on this channel? Oh boy. Both of those questions are very tricky. I have to say, a fictional universe that I would want to live in? Because if I say something like the Marvel or DC universes, they're in constant conflict every other day, and now especially with the Marvel universe, it's getting to the point of like intergalactic consequences. So if it was like I was a civilian in a fictional universe, it would be a nightmare to live in either the Marvel or the DC universe. But if I was like one of the team, like one of the Avengers or one of the Guardians of the Galaxy, yeah, I'd have to say the Marvel universe, because I could totally see myself as an Asgardian living it up there and getting caught up in all those like fucking royal family shenanigans. But I also, if it was more down to earth, I have to say I would love to live in the fictional universe of the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. Maybe because I love the way that it's structured. Like, of course, like any fictional universe, it's going to have its problems and there's still stuff that I'm not hugely on board with. But in terms of like kind of the way the world works, I would love to be a part of J.K. Rowling's magical universe as well. Because in that one, you don't need to be one of the team. You don't need to be in the Golden Trio. You don't need to be in like the lead cast of characters to enjoy the universe. You can just be like an ordinary civilian witch or wizard and still be able to use magic and do all that cool stuff. So I have to say, off the top of my head, it's between those two, I have to say. And in terms of your other question, in terms of favourite stories, I think I answered this in the previous Q&A, but I'll just kind of surmise it again. I really love stories by the classics, of course, Poe, Lovecraft, all that good stuff. I also really, really love stories that are sent to me. So honestly, I can't really pick one. I've always had a soft spot for particular poems as well. Like The Lady of Shalott is one of my particular favourites of mine that I've narrated. I can't really choose one. I have a feeling in the second Q&A I answered this question in more specific detail. Off the top of my head, I'll say The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. I loved narrating that one so much. I felt like I really gave it my all into my performance, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too. So thank you so much for your question, Andrew. Appreciate it. And the next question comes from John the Crazed. What is your criteria for a story narration? You might have mentioned this before, and it could be that you find the answer too complex to explain, or as simple as scary, creepy shiz, John. But I'm curious. My criteria for story narration. Stories that really grip me, that make me kind of take a moment to pause and think, okay, like this is a little bit different. Or if it's like doesn't stand out so much, I think I can maybe bring something more by performing it. I really am drawn towards stories that have from a first person perspective. So I narrate them as though I'm like, I see this, I do that, I see blah, blah, blah. Because then I can flex my acting chops a little bit more and get a bit more into the role rather than being an external observer as a narrator is. But that isn't necessarily a criteria. That's just more stories that I'm drawn to. It depends. Like, it has to be something that either I'm a fan of already or that really grips me and I find especially interesting. If it's a bite-sized short story, it has to have kind of a good punch to the end of it to leave it memorable. Like, if I read a story that's like under 5 minutes, I want it to have like a lingering effect on my listener's mind after they finish listening to it. So I try to pick something out in that way. But yeah, I hope that answers your question, John. Thank you so much. And our last question comes from Kelso from Tumblr. What's your favourite The Adventure Zone arc? Either like one from the balance or the mini arcs. I have to admit I haven't actually finished it yet. I'm terrible, I know. I'm on the last couple of chapters of their adventures of the 100-year cycle. I have to say probably my favourite Adventure Zone arc from the Balance series. Oh, gods. It will probably be The Suffering Game and Pedals to the Metal. I loved Pedals to the Metal because you could kind of feel by that point the McElroys were sinking their teeth into their characters much more. They were having much more fun with it. And The Suffering Game, because it's like, it's edge and it's suffering and it's all Technicolor, like circus style. What's not to love about that? And with high fashion liches, bitchy liches, like what's not to love about that? Oh god. So yeah, I'm still in the moment of listening. I'm still listening to, I believe it's the Stolen Century, and so I haven't completely finished it yet, but so far, Pedals to the Metal and The Suffering Game, absolutely. Oh, but thank you so much for your question. And that wraps up the third installment of these Q&A videos. Thank you all so much to those of you who submitted questions to me. And as always, a huge extra special thank you to my Patreon supporters. So a huge thanks to the Archangels of the Forest, Peter Boswell, John Casey, GentlemanPhilosoraptor, David Bliss, and Hayden Parke, and the amazing Cherubim of the Archive, Roger Martinez. Thank you all so much for your amazing generosity, and I can't wait to see you all at 6,000 subscribers for the next Q&A session. Take care, everyone, and as always, stay wicked and wonderful. Good night.